The humid air of jungle planet XR27 clung to Drub's scales like a second skin. He flared his gills, trying to filter out the excess moisture as he peered nervously at the gathered crowd. A motley assortment of alien species had answered his call, their curious eyes and appendages focused on him. Drub's fin-like hands trembled slightly as he began to speak. "Friends, neighbors, fellow sentients. I've asked you here today to issue a warning about the most unpredictable and dangerous species in the galaxy, humans." A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. A methane-breathing Gorgolian raised a tentacle. "Humans? But they're so squishy. And there's hardly any of them here on XR27. "Exactly," Drub exclaimed, his voice rising an octave. "And that's precisely why I chose this planet. The fewer humans, the better. The safer we all are." He paused, his large, bulbous eyes scanning the perplexed faces before him. "You don't understand. I've seen them in action. I fought alongside them in the war against the inundation a decade ago. Those trillions upon trillions of tiny bug aliens were a nightmare, but the humans were something else entirely." A collective murmur rose from the gathered aliens. The war against the inundation was legendary, and survivors were rare. But Drub, a crystalline quartz being chimed in, its facets reflecting the jungle's green hues, the humans were instrumental in defeating the inundation. "Are you saying they're more dangerous than that swarm?" Drub's fins quivered. "In a way, yes. The inundation was predictable in its relentlessness. Humans are predictable only in their unpredictability. They have these strange laws they follow, but the strangest of all is something they call Murphy's Law." Confused glances were exchanged among the listeners. A serpentine slith hissed, "What is this Murphy's Law?" "That's just it," Drub said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing the crowd to lean in. "It's not a real law. Not like gravity or thermodynamics. It's a human concept that states anything that can go wrong will go wrong in the humans. They embrace it. They expect it. They almost seem to revel in it." The gathered aliens looked at each other in disbelief. A law that predicted failure, and one that was embraced? "I know it sounds insane," Drub continued, "but I've seen it in action. Time and time again, I watched as everything went wrong for the humans. And yet they always came out on top. It's like they thrive on chaos, on the very edge of disaster." He began to pace, his tail gaining momentum. "That's why I came here, to this remote planet. That's why I avoid the spaceport when human ships arrive. Because where humans go, chaos follows. They bring this Murphy's Law with them, and the universe seems to bend to their whim." A floatling, its gas-filled body gently bobbing in the air, spoke up. "But surely, Drub, you're exaggerating. How bad could it be?" Drub's eyes widened, and he gestured emphatically with his fins. "How bad? Let me tell you about my first mission with the human Space Marines. Let me tell you how I learned to fear not just Murphy's Law, but the creatures who made it their creed." As Drub launched into his tale, the jungle around them seemed to grow quieter, as if nature itself was listening. The gathered aliens leaned in, a mix of skepticism and growing unease on their faces. Little did they know, as Drub's story unfolded, that a small human expedition was at that very moment making its way through the dense undergrowth, heading unwittingly towards their location. Murphy's Law, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Drub's scales shimmered with anxiety as he recounted his tale, his bulbous eyes darting nervously around the jungle clearing. "It was my first mission with the human Space Marines," he began, his voice quavering. "We were to infiltrate an inundation hive cluster on the moon of Epsilon Eridani b. Simple recon, they said. In and out, they said." The gathered aliens leaned in, captivated. The mission briefing started normally enough. Equipment checks, strategy review, the usual. But then, the human commander said something that chilled my aquatic blood. He looked at us all and said, "Remember, folks, Murphy's Law. Expect everything to go wrong, and we might just make it out alive." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. The quartz being chimed in, but why would they expect failure? Drub's fins fluttered in agitation. "That's what I thought. But the humans, they just nodded, like this was perfectly normal. Some even smiled. He continued, "As we approached the moon in our stealth shuttle, the humans started a bizarre ritual. They began listing all the things that could go wrong. 'Bet the landing gear fails,' one said. 'Nah, we'll probably lose oxygen first,' another countered. They were wagering on their own demise. The aliens exchanged worried glances as Drub's tale unfolded. Sure enough, as we entered the atmosphere, warning lights blazed across the console. The landing gear was stuck. The human pilot just laughed and said, "Called it. Murphy's buying the first round when we get back." Drub's gills flared with the memory. We crash-landed. By some miracle we survived. But it didn't end there. Oh no, it was just the beginning of Murphy's reign of terror. He recounted a litany of disasters: malfunctioning weapons, faulty communications, unexpected inundation patrols. At every turn, the humans not only anticipated the problems but seemed to revel in them. There we were, surrounded by millions of bug aliens, our weapons jammed, backup 3 hours away. And do you know what the human sergeant said? Drub's voice rose to a near shriek. "Well, boys, looks like Murphy's really testing us today. Let's show him what we're made of." The Gorgolian's tentacles writhed in disbelief. "But how did you survive?" Drub's eyes glazed over, lost in the memory. "That's the thing. The humans, they thrived in the chaos. They used the jammed weapons as clubs. They rewired our communicators to emit a frequency that drove the inundation into a frenzy, turning them against each other. Every problem became a solution." He shuddered visibly. By the time it was over, we'd not only survived but completed the mission. The humans whooped and hollered, slapping each other on the back, thanking this Murphy for the challenge. The jungle clearing fell silent as the aliens processed this information. The slith broke the silence. "So, these humans, they invite disaster." Drub nodded solemnly. "Yes, and somehow they always come out on top. It's as if the universe itself bends to their insane law. I've never encountered anything like it before or since." As Drub paused to catch his breath, a twig snapped in the underbrush nearby. The gathered aliens froze, suddenly aware of movement in the jungle around them. Drub's eyes widened in terror. "No," he whispered. "It can't be. Not here. Not now." From the dense foliage emerged a human, dressed in expedition gear, looking surprised to find the alien gathering. She smiled broadly and waved. "Hi there. Hope we're not interrupting. We're a bit lost. Seems our nav system went haywire. Any chance you folks could point us towards the nearest settlement?" Drub's fins drooped in resignation. Even here, on this remote planet, Murphy's Law had found him. As the human approached, he couldn't help but notice her cheerful demeanor, as if getting lost in an alien jungle was all part of a day's adventure. The fish-like alien turned to his audience, his expression a mix of fear and grim vindication. "You see," he said quietly, "Murphy's Law finds a way. Always." As the human expedition team integrated themselves into the alien gathering, much to Drub's dismay, the fish-like alien found himself compelled to continue his cautionary tale. His bulbous eyes darted nervously between his rapt audience and the cheerful humans setting up camp nearby. "If you think that first mission was bad," Drub continued, his voice lowered to a whisper, "let me tell you about the mech incident. It was during the Battle of Sigma Hydri, one of the turning points in the war against the inundation." The aliens leaned in closer, even the humans pausing their activities to listen. "We had been pushed back to our last defensive line. The inundation swarms were overwhelming us. That's when the humans brought in their mechs, massive war machines piloted by a single human. They were our last hope." Drub's fins quivered as he recounted the memory. The mech pilots gathered for their briefing. "I'll never forget what their commander said. All right, folks, Murphy's going to be working overtime today. Let's give him a show he'll never forget." The floatling bobbed in confusion. But surely with such powerful machines, they would want everything to go smoothly. Drub shook his head vigorously. That's what any sane species would think, but not humans. No, they seemed to relish the challenge. As they suited up, I heard them making bets on what would go wrong first. He described the mechs launching into battle, a sight both awe-inspiring and terrifying. At first, everything seemed to be going well. The mechs were cutting through the inundation swarms like a plasma torch through hull plating. But then, Drub paused for dramatic effect, noting with a mix of annoyance and fear that even the humans in the camp were hanging on his every word. The lead mech's power core started to overload. In the middle of the battlefield, the pilot's response? He laughed and said, "Classic Murphy. Watch this, folks." The gathered aliens gasped as Drub described how the pilot intentionally pushed his mech further, drawing in massive swarms of the inundation. Just when we thought he was done for, he ejected, but not to safety. No, he ejected straight into another mech's cockpit. 2 pilots, 1 mech, surrounded by millions of enemy bugs. Drub's voice rose in pitch as he continued. And do you know what they did? They overclocked that mech's systems, pushed it beyond all safe limits. They were laughing, as warning sirens blared around them. He described, with a mixture of awe and horror, how the humans used their overheating mech as a giant bug zapper, attracting and frying millions of inundation drones. When that mech finally gave out, they surfed its falling chassis into the enemy's command node, taking out the swarm's coordination center. The quartz being's crystals vibrated in disbelief. Surely this is an exaggeration. One of the humans, who had been listening intently, chimed in. "Nah, sounds about right. Sigma Hydra, you said. I think my uncle was there. Always said it was one hell of a party." Drub's fins drooped in resignation. You see? They call this madness a party. By all logic, they should have been wiped out. Instead, their impossible tactics won the day. The inundation forces routed, and the humans celebrated like it had all gone according to plan. He looked around at the astonished faces of his alien audience. That's the true danger of Murphy's Law. The humans don't just accept that things will go wrong, they count on it. They plan for it. And somehow, against all reason, they thrive on it. As Drub finished speaking, a loud crack echoed through the jungle, followed by the crash of a falling tree. One of the humans from the expedition team jogged into view. Hey folks, the human said with an embarrassed grin. Anybody know how to fix a grav lift? Ours just went haywire and knocked down a tree. But hey, on the bright side, we've got firewood now. Drub turned to his audience, his expression a mixture of vindication and dread. You see, Murphy's Law follows them everywhere. And the truly terrifying part, they're happy about it. As the aliens murmured among themselves, casting wary glances at the humans, Drub couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. With humans around, invoking their strange law, who knew what chaos would unfold in their once peaceful jungle refuge. As the human expedition busied themselves with their malfunctioning equipment, Drub's audience shifted uneasily, their alien features contorted with a mix of fascination and fear. The fish-like alien's gills flared anxiously as he continued his tale. But friends, Drub said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, the true insanity of Murphy's Law revealed itself during what we now call the impossible victory. The Slith's forked tongue flicked out nervously. Impossible how? Drub's bulbous eyes darted around before he answered. It was the final push against the inundation's home world. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And then some. He described the scene, a massive fleet of human and allied ships approaching the bug alien's home system. As we entered the system, a human admiral came on the comms. "All right, people," she said, "let's make Murphy work overtime today." The gathered aliens leaned in, enraptured despite their growing unease. First, our long-range sensors failed, Drub recounted. The humans cheered. Actually cheered. Flying blind, one of them said. Just how I like it. He went on to list a cascade of disasters: navigation systems scrambled, weapon systems misfiring, life support fluctuating. With each new problem, the humans grew more excited. It was as if they were playing some demented game with the universe, Drub said, his fins quivering. The worse things got, the more they seemed to enjoy it. The quartz being chimed in, its facets reflecting confusion. But how did they fight like this? Drub's eyes widened. That's just it. They turned every disaster into an advantage. When their targeting systems failed, they fired blindly, saying something about a spray and pray technique. Somehow they hit more targets than ever before. He described how the humans intentionally overloaded their ship's reactors, using the energy fluctuations to create makeshift EMP weapons. How they turned their malfunctioning nav systems into randomized evasive maneuvers that the inundation couldn't predict. At one point, Drubb said, his voice filled with disbelief, a human battlecruiser lost all power. Instead of retreating, they used the planet's gravity to slingshot themselves directly into the main inundation hive ship. They were whooping and hollering the whole way down. The alien audience gasped collectively. Even the nearby human expedition had stopped their repairs to listen, nodding along with proud grins. When it was all over, Drubb continued, the inundation was defeated. The humans had won, against all odds, against all reason. And do you know what they said? He paused for effect, then mimicked a human voice. Well, folks, looks like we out-Murphy'd Murphy today. Let's see if the bar on this bug planet still stands. As Drubb finished his tale, a loud explosion echoed from the human camp. One of the expedition members jogged over, his face and clothes covered in soot but grinning ear to ear. Hey, quick question, the human said, still smiling. Any of you folks know how to put out a plasma fire? Our backup generator just went kaboom, but on the bright side, I think we just discovered a new element. Drubb turned to his audience, his expression a mix of exasperation and fear. You see, this is what I've been trying to tell you. With humans around, invoking Murphy's Law, disaster doesn't just strike, it tap dances and wearing a top hat and singing show tunes. As the gathered aliens began to nervously edge away from the human camp, Drubb couldn't help but notice the humans' excitement growing with each new problem. He realized, with a sinking feeling in his swim bladder, that the day's chaos was far from over. Murphy's Law isn't just strange, Drubb muttered to himself. It's a cosmic practical joke, and humans are the punchline that keeps on giving. As the human expedition continued their chaotic attempts to repair their equipment, Drubb's audience had grown visibly nervous. The floatling had drifted higher into the air, as if trying to escape the range of Murphy's Law, while the Gorgolian's tentacles were tied in anxious knots. Drubb, his scales now a pale shade of worry, continued his tale. After the war, I thought surely the humans would settle down. But no, my friends. Murphy's Law followed them into peacetime, and they welcomed it like an old friend. The quartz being chimed curiously. How does such a law function without conflict? Drubb's gills flared in exasperation. Function? Oh, it more than functioned. It thrived. I spent 2 cycles on Earth after the war, trying to understand their strange ways. Let me tell you about their peacetime Murphy. He recounted his experiences, each more bewildering than the last. They have these events called team-building exercises, believe me. There's no building involved, only chaos. I watched as they purposely sabotaged their own equipment, then raced to fix it. They called it problem-solving skills. The aliens listened in horrified fascination as Drubb described human recreational activities. They throw themselves out of perfectly good aircraft. For fun. When I asked why, they said, because anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Might as well enjoy the ride down. He shuddered visibly. And don't get me started on their entertainment. They have these reality shows where they deliberately put people in impossible situations just to watch them struggle. The humans call it good television. As if on cue, a shout came from the human camp. Hey guys, who wants to try our new improvised jetpack? We've got a spare fire extinguisher and some duct tape. Drubb's fins drooped in resignation. You see, even their solutions are disasters waiting to happen. He went on to explain how he tried to understand Murphy's Law, to find some logic in the chaos. I asked a human physicist to explain it to me scientifically. Do you know what he said? Oh, Murphy's Law isn't about science. It's about attitude. The gathered aliens exchanged confused glances. Attitude, Drubb exclaimed. As if expecting and welcoming disaster is a sensible way to live. But the truly terrifying part, it works for them. Somehow, some way, the humans always come out on top. He described human explorers venturing into the most dangerous parts of space, armed with nothing but faulty equipment and a cheerful disposition. They call it boldly going where no one has gone before. I call it a death wish, but they always return with groundbreaking discoveries and harrowing tales that they recount with glee. The Slith hissed thoughtfully. But surely not all humans are like this. Drubb shook his head vigorously. That's what I thought too. But even their most cautious scientists invoke Murphy's Law. If there's a chance of several things going wrong, they say, they will all go wrong at the same time. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. And do you know what's worst of all? It's spreading. Other species are starting to adopt this madness. I've seen Centauri engineers purposely miscalibrate their warp drives just to see what happens. I've watched Black Sea diplomats intentionally scramble their universal translators because misunderstandings lead to better treaties. As Drubb's tale wound down, the human expedition had gathered nearby, listening with amused expressions. "Aw, come on," one of them said good-naturedly. "We're not that bad. Murphy's Law just keeps us on our toes. Besides, what's life without a little excitement?" Drubb turned to his audience, his expression a mix of fear and exasperation. "You see? This is why I came to this remote planet. This is why I warn you all. Because where humans go..." He was interrupted by a loud rumbling from beneath their feet. The ground began to shake. One of the humans checked a device and exclaimed excitedly, "Wow, looks like we accidentally activated a dormant volcanic system with our malfunctioning equipment. Who's up for some emergency geological study?" As the aliens began to panic and the humans sprang into action with enthusiastic problem-solving, Drubb sank to the ground, covering his eyes with his fins. "Murphy's Law finds a way," he mumbled. "It always finds a way." As the ground continued to shake beneath them, Drubb's audience scattered in panic. The floatling bobbed frantically in the air, the Gorgolian's tentacles flailed wildly, and the quartz being vibrated at an alarming frequency. Only the humans seemed unfazed, excitedly discussing their plans to study the unexpected geological event. Drubb, still covering his eyes with his fins, peeked out at the chaos unfolding around him. "This," he said to no one in particular, "this is exactly what I was warning you about." One of the humans approached Drubb, grinning from ear to ear. "Hey, fish buddy, want to help us set up some seismographs? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Drubb's gills flared in disbelief. "Once in a lifetime? You're causing a volcanic eruption." The human shrugged nonchalantly. "Well, yeah, but think of the data we'll collect. Besides, where there's volcanic activity, there might be valuable minerals. This could make the planet a prime mining location." As if on cue, another human shouted excitedly, "Hey everyone, I think I just found a vein of superconductive material. Murphy's really outdone himself this time." Drubb watched in a mixture of horror and awe as the humans sprang into action. They were setting up equipment, taking samples, and generally treating the potential catastrophe like it was the most exciting thing to happen to them all year. The alien audience, who had initially fled, slowly began to return, drawn by curiosity at the humans' strange behavior. "You see," Drubb said, gesturing wildly at the busy humans, "this is what I've been trying to tell you. They don't just accept disaster, they embrace it. They chase it. They chase it. They court it like a deranged suitor." The Slith, who had coiled itself around a tree for safety, hissed thoughtfully. But they seemed to be managing the situation quite well. Drubb's fins drooped in resignation. "That's just it. Somehow they always do. It's like the universe itself bends to accommodate their madness." As the tremors began to subside, the human expedition leader approached the group, covered in soot but beaming with excitement. "Good news, everyone," she announced. "We've managed to stabilize the volcanic activity, and in the process we've discovered a new energy source, 3 previously unknown mineral deposits, and what looks like the ruins of an ancient civilization, all thanks to our equipment malfunctions and Murphy's Law." The gathered aliens stared in disbelief, then slowly turned to look at Drubb. The fish-like alien sighed deeply. And that, my friends, is why humans are the most terrifying species in the galaxy. Not because they're aggressive or warlike, but because the very fabric of reality seems to warp around them. They turn disasters into discoveries, chaos into opportunity. He gestured at the jubilant human expedition. I came to this remote planet to escape them and their Murphy's Law. And in doing so, I inadvertently brought them here, leading to the very chaos I was trying to avoid. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Drubb's audience. The court's being chimed in, so by trying to warn us about Murphy's Law. I invoked it, Drubb finished, his voice a mixture of awe and resignation. Maybe I've been human all along. As the human expedition began to set up a more permanent camp, chattering excitedly about their plans to study the planet's newfound wonders, Drubb found himself surrounded by curious aliens peppered him with questions about humans and their strange ways. He realized, with a start, that his warning had backfired spectacularly. Instead of frightening his neighbors away from humans, he had inadvertently piqued their interest. Some were even asking how they could learn more about this Murphy's Law. As the sun set on the eventful day, Drubb watched the humans and aliens mingle, sharing stories and laughter. He couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Well, Murphy, he said to himself, I guess you got me too. Maybe embracing chaos isn't so bad after all. But please, if you're listening, could we have just one day without any major disasters? At that moment, a human excitedly shouted something about finding a dormant alien AI in the newly discovered ruins. Drubb sighed, his fins twitching in anticipation of the chaos to come. I suppose that's a no then. Well, in for a credit, in for a cubit. Who wants to go explore some potentially world-ending ancient technology? And with that, Drubb, the once fearful alien, waddled off to join the humans in their next Murphy-guided adventure. After all, if you can't beat Murphy's Law, you might as well join it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.